He was born in the summer of his 27th year, coming home to a place he'd never been before. He left yesterday behind him. You might say he was born again. You might say he found the key for every door. When he first came to the mountains, his life was far away, on the road, hanging by a song. But the string's already broken, and he doesn't really care. It keeps changing fast, and it don't last for long. With the Colorado Rocky Mountain High, I've seen it rain and fire in the sky. The shadow from the starlight is softer than a lullaby. Rocky Mountain High, Colorado. Rocky Mountain High, Colorado. He climbed Cathedral Mountains. He saw silver clouds below. He saw everything as far as you can see. And they say that he got crazy once, and he tried to touch the sun, and he lost a friend but kept the memory. Now he walks in quiet solitude, the forests and the streams, seeking grace in every step he takes. His side is turned inside himself to try and understand the serenity of a clear blue mountain lake. In the Colorado Rocky Mountain High, I've seen it rain and fire in the sky. Talk to God and listen to the casual reply. Rocky Mountain High, Colorado. Rocky Mountain High, Colorado. Now his life is full of wonder, but his heart still knows some fear of a simple thing he cannot comprehend. Why they try to tear the mountains down to bring in a couple more people, more scars upon the land. In the Colorado Rocky Mountain High, I've seen it rain and fire in the sky. I know he'd be a poorer man if he never saw an eagle fly. Rocky Mountain High, Colorado Rocky Mountain High, I've seen it rain and fire in the sky. Friends around the campfire and everybody's high. Rocky Mountain High, Colorado. Rocky Mountain High, Rocky Mountain High, Rocky Mountain High, Rocky Mountain High.
When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, and to love. Live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, then they will not care how devout you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you have lived by. If there are gods, but unjust, then you should not want to worship them. If there are no gods, then you will be gone, but will have lived a noble life that will live on in the memories of your loved ones. Those quotes are from Marcus Aurelius, April 26, 121 through March 17, 180. And our second reading is from Walden of Henry David Thoreau. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor do I wish to practice resignation, unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all of the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swatch and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it, and publish its meanness to the world? Or if it were sublime, to know it by experience, and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. For most men, it appears to me, are in a strange uncertainty about it, whether it is of the devil or of God, and to have somewhat hastily concluded that it is the chief end of men here to glorify God and enjoy Him forever.
Jim Farless, been a member of the church since '76, and probably would never have been comfortable doing a spiritual journey if it had to be written and presented in a formal setting. But this seemed to be a more relaxed setting and a way that I could express myself and tell my story.
And you're coming up on 50 years in the congregation. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I know. And 55 years with my beautiful wife.
Smart man. Smart man. Yeah. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of good conversations around your time in the congregation, but let's go back to the beginning. So
Sure.
Where did you grow up? What was life like? Who'd you grow up with?
Yeah. That's a common question that you hear a lot, and it's one that's kind of difficult for me from the standpoint that we moved around a lot. My dad was an air traffic controller, and in his early days was trying to start his career. So I went to 4 different elementary schools. My first inkling about religion surprisingly started in Quincy, Illinois. My dad was a Baptist, grew up in the Baptist church. My mother was Presbyterian. So we went to the Baptist church there. I don't have any memory whatsoever of the church itself, but I do remember the minister coming to lunch on Sundays. So I know that my dad was either like a deacon or elder in the church or whatever. We moved to Springfield, Illinois, and joined a Baptist church there, and I was actually baptized by immersion. Yeah, I can still remember the water was pretty cold. The only place that I really felt like we had roots was my grandfather's farm in southern Missouri. And we did live in Springfield for a while, which was fairly close. And so every week we would go to the farm and get eggs and milk. And the way that relates to my spiritual journey, I remember when my great-grandmother passed away, my father and my grandfather and I dug the grave for my great-grandmother. It was Mount Olive Baptist Church in Elkland, Missouri. And it was a rainy day, and my job was to bail water. So they gave me a 2-pound coffee can. And so while my father and grandfather were digging, I was bailing water until the grade got so deep I couldn't bail the water out anymore. So, but religion was all around family, and I had a brother who's 2 years younger and a sister that's 8 years younger. And it wasn't until much later that my parents adopted another daughter. So
you were the oldest.
I was the oldest, yeah.
And how did that?
My brother, this was not even something that I had thought about, so it's interesting. My brother and I had an interesting relationship. There was a lot of conflict, so much so that my dad got boxing gloves for us. And I was so much bigger than my brother, even though it was just 2 years. I would put my hand on his forehead and just hold him back, and he would just wail away. But in our adult life, we really made an effort to come together. We would go on camping trips together, just the two of us, and sit around the campfire and tell stories about our childhood. And the interesting thing is, sometimes our stories differed in what we thought were the facts of the situation. I had dyslexia and really was not aware of it, didn't have a name for it, just knew that there was something different. I remember, because I went to so many different schools, some schools use phonics, some schools used, were trying to teach with matching words with pictures and that sort of thing. I can remember my dad sitting and trying to read with me and wondered how I got, when we were reading the story, the little red hen, and I said the little red chicken, and he thought, how can you get the word chicken out of 3 letters? I remember in 7th grade, one of the teachers was having us round robin reading, and I read a paragraph, and when it got time for the next person to read, she said, would you read the paragraph that Jim just read so that we can understand it? And it still is a hurtful thing that I carry with me even to this day. But at the end of that semester, I made straight A's. So I found ways of getting around the dyslexia to succeed. People use the term imposter syndrome. I have dealt with feeling somewhat inadequate in situations where people put me in leadership roles or wanted me to take a leadership role that I just felt uncomfortable being in, because at some point you might have to read out loud to other people, and that was always very uncomfortable. I'm also an introvert, so that combination has created an environment where I tend to be an observer and spend a lot of time of thinking and processing things in my head. So, and that space in my head has become, as I've gotten older, a more and more comfortable place to be and a happier place to be. When we moved to Indiana, we were only there was one house between us and the Methodist church, so because of location, we became Methodists. My mom was quite a reader, and one of the books that I picked up that has kind of stuck with me for the rest of my life was a book by J.B. Phillips. He was the one who wrote, some people might know about the New Testament for modern English. Prior to that, he wrote a book called Your God is Too Small. And that resonated with me. His theme was, whatever you perceive God to be, he's so much greater than that. And so, as I have gone through life, I've decided that there's been a lot of philosophers and writers who've written about what is the nature of God and what is God. And I've decided that that's, for me, pretty much a waste of time. That it's better to get on with life. So that is one insight that I had. And because I was taking my religion pretty seriously, my religion at that time was teaching me that if I sinned, I could get forgiveness. And I don't even remember what I did, but it had something to do with disobeying my mother. And I knew that if I prayed to God and asked for forgiveness, it would be forgiven. But my thinking, at a young age was, well, I knew it was wrong before I did it, so I don't deserve forgiveness. So I put it off for weeks and months. And during that whole time, I thought, if I die, I'm going to go to hell because I didn't ask for forgiveness. And finally, I realized I can forgive other people. They don't even have to ask. And I thought, well, surely, if there's a God, he's got to be more forgiving than that. And so another insight that I had was, I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not going to live with guilt. And so that was pretty important. In school, I had trouble finding people that I could talk to. I remember reading excerpts from Henry David Thoreau. That was our homework assignments. And I was really excited to go to school the next day because I thought, man, this guy, I like this guy. He sees the world more like I see the world. And before I could even open up my mouth and share, my classmates were saying, this guy is a kook. I mean, he is off the wall. Where does he come off? He's not patriotic, And so I sat there not saying anything. But at church camp, I could be vulnerable. We would stay up almost all night talking about life. And so insight number 3 is find your people. Find people that share your values and people that you feel comfortable with. In my freshman year in college, I found a book called The Great Religions and What They Believe. That exposed me to Hinduism and Buddhism and others. I got a copy of Gandhi's biography and started practicing different kinds of diets. I would try to go on his diets, and I did some fasting. And there was an author by the name of Alan Watts, who was a longshoreman out in California, became a philosopher and a writer, and he wrote a book called The True Believers. And there was one passage in that book that I have held with me, and that religion is like an arrow pointing the way to live your life. But some people just come up and suck on the finger. And I thought there's a lot of safety, I think, and comfort in religion for people. If they have a set of rules to live by, then they don't have to think about it. But I think it's often, at least in my opinion, it prevents them from really living. One area of psychology called Gestalt psychology. Gestalt psychology talks about being able to look at reality in different ways. One of the images that they often present as an example is two faces, silhouette, looking at each other, but in the space between them, there's a vase. It helped me. I'll just give one example. On one of my backpacking trips, I was up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and I had a brand new camera, and I was taking pictures and just really enjoying. The next day, it was foggy and rainy, and I thought, this is really bad. I can't take pictures. But I started seeing flowers and mushrooms and things up close, and I was able to flip my Gestalt and still have a good experience. So I kind of hold that with me whenever there's something negative in my life. I try to use Gestalt to see it in a different way. So that's another one of my insights. Because that freshman year was so confining, I was ready to get out of Dodge. And so the next summer I went to New Hampshire and worked in a Christian Science home. One of the residents at the nursing facility was blind. And when I had time off, I would go to her apartment and get her, and we would take walks through the garden. And she always asked me to describe the flowers and pick up things for her to touch. And one day she said, "Sister so-and-so passed away, didn't she?" And I said, "Yes, she did." I said, "How did you know?" And she says, "Well, they won't tell us, but she hasn't been showing up for breakfast, so I knew something was wrong." And she said, "I just wish they could be honest with us." And I thought, a religion that doesn't allow you to be honest with people has a flaw, at least in my opinion. Before I met Lynette, I had gone through about 6 months of being disillusioned about school and where I was heading, and I'd signed up to go into the Peace Corps and was ready to I was only a month away from going to training. But Lynette and I met. We were with her roommate and my roommate, and I remember at the end of the evening we decided to go have a bite to eat somewhere, and we all got in my roommate drove a Corvette at that time. So the four of us getting in the Corvette was kind of tight, but Lynette was sitting on my lap for the very first time. Felt really good. I was turning 21 the next week, and so Lynette took me out to buy my first legal drink. We got married and went into decided to go to grad school. And at that time, I lost my undergraduate deferment, and I was eligible for the draft. And so I had spent 3 years preparing to declare myself as a conscientious objector. And so I had letters from Sunday school teachers, from ministers, from a state representative. Every time that I read a book or had a quote, I would send it to the draft board. So they had quite a thick file on me. But I had to appear before the draft board and defend my position as a conscientious objector. I remember walking in the door of our apartment, and I went right to this little desk that we had, and I got a legal pad out, started writing, and Lynette said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm writing my appeal, and there's no way they're going to give me the status." There was a lot of conflict in the way they questioned me. So I was very surprised. And a week or so later, I got a letter saying that they granted me the deferment. One of the things that I think was in my favor is that at that time they had a lottery system, and my number was 307, so I would probably never have been drafted. But that was another insight in my spiritual journey, and that was, hold true to your convictions. If there's an easy way out, that may not be the way to go. Stay true to your convictions. When Lynette and I were first dating, we would decide on Sunday morning where would we like to go for church. And if we wanted to hear good music, we would go to the Second Baptist Church and enjoy that. If we wanted an intellectual experience, we would go to the Unitarian Church in Terre Haute. So we were a little bit knowledgeable of the Methodist or the Unitarian Church. So we looked at, when we were in Brown County, going to the Unitarian Church in Bloomington, and that just did not seem to be a good fit. And so we put being churched at all on hold for until we moved to Columbus, and we were ready to look for church. And at that time, we were just a fellowship. We were meeting in the 11th and Chestnut Church building, all lay-led. Felt like a place that needed us in a way. Sometimes when we had guest speakers, I would jokingly say if they brought their family, they would outnumber the congregation. On Father's Day of 1989, my father passed away. And I was with him when he passed. And I can remember I was holding his hand. And at first I wasn't sure what had happened because the nurse came in and said, "He's gone. I need to go get a doctor to sign off on the time of death." And after she left the room, he had this big gasp of air, and it seemed to be alive again to me. And I just held his hand and I said, "It's okay. It's time to go." And the nurse came back in and said, "That happens sometimes." But I learned not to be afraid of death. When I was still in college, I joined Big Brothers, and Robbie was my little brother. And he used to say, I'm not afraid of the dark. People say they're afraid of the dark. I'm just afraid of what's in the dark. And I think death is kind of that way. I'm not afraid of death. But sometimes religion teaches us to be afraid of what happens after death. I think that's one of my spiritual insights, is not to be afraid of death. It was interesting to have a part-time ministry. I remember Richard Ruall did a spiritual retreat. I came away from that week thinking, I'm kind of a spiritual amoeba. I've kind of floated through life, picking up little insights or little experiences that have sort of begun to coalesce into a philosophy of life. As a teacher, I've not always been comfortable expressing political views, so it's always been comfortable to know that there was a place where you could just be yourself and express yourself and be accepted. One of the things that I did when I retired was I went on a medical mission, and Joanne Abel was on that medical mission. And Joanne is very persuasive, and she said, I have a job for you when you get back to Indiana. And so for the next decade, she had me picking up seniors from the senior center to take them to doctor's appointments. I also drove for Just Friends. Lynette and I are committed enough that we have set money aside to, on our demise, we'll go to the church. So financially, we feel that it's very important that there's a liberal religious entity within this community. Having traveled around in the world and seeing different religions, it's nice to see it kind of all coming together on the campus. That sense of namaste is very real there. And I'd like to feel a part of that process. That's really very important, I think, for us. I'll put in a plug. We can really use some new young people on the care team. And I hope that comes about.
Do you want to talk about why the care team or the work of care is important or central?
It's important to be with people when there's a need. I know on my trek when I was in the Himalayas, I had altitude sickness. I had never been to 18,000 feet before. I'd been to 14,000 feet many times in the U.S. So in 19 days of hiking, I had 2 days in the middle when I was really weak, very not able to hold any food down. And one of the porters, or one of the guides, took it upon himself to care for me. And it was very touching. And it's nice to be able to return that to other people. Even way back when I was in church camp, and one of the campers said, Jim, you see yourself as a caregiver, but you need to learn to accept with grace when other people want to care for you. And so that was another insight, was learning to accept care.
Any final thoughts or things you want to add?
I have just a few. insights that have come along that I'd like to share. I don't think I fully ever understood how much my parents loved me until I had my own children. And that's an insight that I would never have had I not had children. Both of our children are adopted, and both are very much a blessing to our lives. And we adopted Andrea. The first time I changed her diapers, when the day that we picked her up in the front seat of the car, I looked down and said, "You're going to have to be very patient with me because you've been a child longer than I've been a daddy." By the time that we had Michael, I had the joy of taking a semester off and being a full-time dad. And that was really, really great. I think back very fondly of those periods of time that I had with the kids at home. Do something every single day to make the world better. And it doesn't have to be big. Holding the door for someone, watering your neighbor's flowers, picking up trash in your neighborhood, giving your spouse a kiss. All those things make the world a little better. It doesn't have to be grand. Worldly possessions are not particularly important. Don't spend your time and your resources trying to gather things. As I've gotten older, I've learned not to regret the things that I can't do anymore, but take gratitude in the things that I continue to be able to do. So that's a principle that I try to live by. Enjoy life. Steve Jasper once at church said, "Jim, whenever I ask you, what are you doing in your life? I expect the next few words to be, I've been playing, fill in the blank." And so I really believe that life is to be enjoyed. My son, on a recent phone call, said that he had listened to a podcast, and the saying that he picked up that he shared with me was, everyone has two lives. The second one begins when you realize you only have one. And I think, well, there's some truth to that. I wanted to weave a thread back to the opening song that we started with, and the reading from Henry David Thoreau. And that relates to my love of backpacking. And Henry David Thoreau in Walden Pond said he wanted to simplify life. And I don't think you can get any simpler than backpacking. You have to put everything that you are going to need for potentially 7 days in your backpack. It doesn't matter what your bank account is at home or what your religious or political views are. You're simply out in the wilderness with the materials that you have put together for your survival and your own wits. And sometimes things don't go well. I've been on trips where people have fallen and broken ankles, broken wrists. I've had my food stolen by a bear in the middle of the night. The Marbucks know that story. And I've also had a hiking companion when there were just two of us that started out, and he had to be airlifted out by helicopter. So it's not for the faint of heart, but the benefit that I get out of it is you are really experiencing life at the very, very basics. And you get to see things that less than 1% of the population ever sees. People that know me that will say, why would you be going to a church if you're an atheist? It just doesn't make sense to them. And sometimes I've struggled to answer that, but I think about my teaching days. I had this poster hanging on the wall in my classroom, and it said, "None of us is as smart as all of us." I think you can extrapolate that concept. None of us are as brave singularly as we are together. None of us have the potential to influence social justice as much as all of us together. And none of us can impact the environment as much as all of us together. And none of us have as much love as we all have together.
If I could save time in a bottle, the first thing that I'd like to do is to save every day till eternity passes away, just to spend them with you. If I could make days last forever, if words could make wishes come true, I'd save every day like a treasure, and then again I would spend them with you. But there never seems to be enough time to do the things you want to do once you find them. I've looked around enough to know you're the one I want to go through time with. If I had a box just for wishes and dreams that had never come true, the box would be empty except for the memory of how they were answered by you. But there never seems to be enough time to do the things you want to do once you find them. I've looked around enough to know you're the one I want to go